The name of the game for the president this week is redefinition, as Team Biden scrambles to temper and distort expectations ahead of Thursday's economic report that quite possibly, if not likely, will show GDP decline in the second quarter. This after that already happened in the first quarter, and those two consecutive quarters of lower production would meet the commonly accepted definition of the word that they refuse to use. Recession. The CNN headline there characterizes it as Biden facing a moment of truth. The fact that they're getting out ahead of this looming news suggests they may already know a thing or two about what that pending truth actually is. But is the truth something for Biden to face, or is the truth something for Biden to fabricate? That's where the redefinition comes in. If you control the definition of terms, you control the truth itself, or at least you can heavily influence people to accept your version of it. Though, of course, a gun to the head and the repetition of 2 + 2 = 5 does not the truth make. But the point is, in the statement, if this, then that, there's a lot of power in who decides what this is, whether it's correct or not. And in retrospect, that strategy is actually very common for this president. In many different ways, this has been a presidency by redefinition. The president's legislative accomplishments are very few. Primarily, he has the infrastructure bill and the ironically named American Rescue Plan, accounting for trillions in made-up dollars that are largely responsible for the inflation that they simply redefined as transitory. And when he can't work with Congress, which is most of the time, Biden has governed by redefinition as well, often avoiding Congress entirely. Don't like guns, but can't pass gun laws? Well, just redefine what a gun is. You want to force gender ideology on schools, but you don't have a legal basis to do it? Well, just redefine what a woman is. Or, of course, just refuse to define it at all. Watching a record number of illegal immigrants cross the border, just call the border secure. And likewise, do not ever explain what your definition of secure is. The most popular presidency of all time was itself achieved in part through the redefinition of electoral law, some of which has since been legislatively or judicially returned to original definitions. Though, of course, I wouldn't venture into any topics that aren't approved in Her Majesty's kingdom of acceptable debate. Regardless, that's not the point of this video. The point of this video is that this definitional creativity is not done with any pursuit of truth. That's why Biden won't be facing any truth, as CNN forecasts. It's only done in pursuit of a particular outcome. And so Biden will only face the outcome that he wants, whether it's true or not. Because, of course, what's important is not the fact that you have less money in your wallet and there's less stuff on the shelves to buy with it. What's important is that we all call that something pleasant. And we can see that pleasant name, even if it's only as minimally pleasant as not a recession, is the priority. It's a constant, actually. No matter what the numbers on Thursday show, the title will be not a recession. All of their messaging has already decided it. If branding is more important than quality, that's a pretty good indicator of a crappy product and just of manipulation. Another good indicator of manipulation is the commitment to these pre-conclusions. The conclusion is declared before the evidence is in, as Joe Biden did on Monday, confidently predicting there will be no recession. And it's a prediction you can count on for reasons they'll figure out later.
We're not going to be in a recession, in my view. My hope is we go from this rapid growth to steady growth, God willing. I don't think we're going to see a recession.
Well, if only the problem was the pace of growth. It's not. The problem is no growth. We just saw a quarter of decline, not growth, and we're likely looking at another one. That's fine. You're allowed to predict no recession. We just need to know what no recession means. How do you measure recession or no recession? The president's press secretary won't say.
And what is exactly the White House's definition of a recession?
Again, I'm not going to define it from here. I'm just going to leave it to the NBER, as we have stated, of how they define recession.
You won't declare one until they have declared it one.
I'm just saying that we're just not going to define it.
Well, hey, we don't make that definition. Other people make that definition. Okay, so the president's prediction is according to their definition then. Oh, no. The president's prediction is according to criteria we'll make up for that purpose later. In other words, the conclusion is predetermined. They'll just take whatever numbers are reported on Thursday and shove them into whatever reasoning they need in whatever way that they can. In fairness to Karine Jean-Pierre, it is true that recessions are formally defined and declared from a government statistical perspective by the National Bureau of Economic Research. And we'll get to that in a minute. As we'll see, that analysis is likely not the refuge for them that they seem to think it is. But for now, they have some more rebranding to try and use. This isn't a recession, says Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, who admits that she was wrong about inflation, but for some reason expects you to believe that she's right about this. It is not a recession. It's just something else in which there's less growth.
This is not an economy that's in recession, but we're in a period of transition in which growth is slowing.
Yet we are not in reverse. We're actually in drive going backwards. We're not falling. In fact, we're seeing plenty of gravity-assisted acceleration. This is not a crash. It's just a spontaneous structural integrity test. The sense of it doesn't matter. All that matters is that you do not use the R word. And that means scrapping any definition that leads to the R word, including and especially the definition that everybody commonly accepted up until 5 seconds ago, says White House economic advisor Brian Deese.
2 quarters of negative growth in a row, that's a recession.
Right, and certainly in terms of the technical definition, it's not a recession. The technical definition considers a much broader spectrum of data points. We need to train that focus on that rather than on sort of technical debates about backward-looking data.
As though looking back is itself pure technicality and not the single best predictor of what's ahead as well. If you're a plumber and you turn my house into an accidental water park, do you get to say, well, I know it doesn't meet the technical definition of good plumbing, but hey, let's not live in the past? Or do I get to say, you're fired, now get the hell out of here because you're never touching another pipe in my house again? And it's not just that past performance is an excellent predictor of future results. It's also a matter of justice, too. Just saying it's in the past does not absolve responsibility. Just saying it's in the past is not a defense at trial. Yeah, it's in the past, and the fact that it happened is exactly why there must be accountability for it. But sure, like Karine also said, there is some degree of truth to this deference to the National Bureau of Economic Research, an ostensibly nonpartisan nonprofit on whom the government relies to make these formal designations, and has for decades and has done so retrospectively into U.S. history. Their analysis is more detailed than the simpler, often media-cited definition of recession as 2 consecutive quarters of declining GDP. The White House can try to act sophisticated by pretending they're relying on this analysis because it's so much more academically thorough, but we all know they're doing this for no principle other than it allows them to explain away the bad numbers that are likely to come this week. If the simple numbers showed good news, well, then they'd have no use for the technicals. But the bigger problem with this strategy is not just that it's a deflection. It's that it almost certainly doesn't get them out of their definition problem anyway. Their own rescue metrics do not, in fact, rescue anything. Hat tip to Michael Strain from the American Enterprise Institute on this find. Out of the past 10 times that the U.S. economy has experienced 2 consecutive quarters of GDP decline, how many times did the NBER formally declare a recession? 10. 100% of the time. These things go hand in hand almost always because while the simple definition and the technical definition are different, they're still measuring largely the same thing. Sure, the NBER is considering a variety of different metrics, but as a broad metric, GDP is capturing effectively all of them. If specific economic pieces are performing poorly, well then in general, so is the economy overall. If the economy overall is performing poorly, it's because of a combination of specific economic pieces. That's why these specific and general metrics correlate so strongly. The general is simply an aggregation of the specific. And when we separate out those specifics, they are still very poor. The White House wants us to believe that a bad broad measure of GDP somehow ignores otherwise good specific measures. It doesn't. The specific metrics included in the NBER analysis also look likely to qualify for a recession. In addition to GDP, the NBER considers real income. but that's down 3.6% in the last year. The NBER considers industrial production. That is hanging on by a thread. Manufacturing production was down 0.1% in May. Industrial output was up just 0.2%. The NBER considers retail sales. Those declined 0.3% in May. The NBER considers employment numbers. That's the only thing Team Biden is touting, citing low unemployment. But of course, unemployment can be a mirage. Unemployment only measures people actively looking for work. And for many reasons, people have left the workforce in the last 2 years and are no longer looking. How do we know? Because there are fewer people working today than there were before coronavirus. The better metric is the labor force participation rate, the percentage of adults who are currently working, and that number remains lower today than it was in February 2020. Not only has it not recovered to where it was before corona, it has actually dropped in the second quarter of this year as well, down 0.2% from March to June. So no, the specifics and the technicals that they insist that we all wait for are not good either and will likely show the exact same thing that the simple measure shows, not just welcome to a recession, but you've been living in one for months now. This reliance on the technical analysis is no more sensible than your doctor telling you you're in very poor health, but you expecting to see good news on the full chart. No, it turns out he said you're in poor health because you have a broken leg and a failing heart and also cancer and a little bit of AIDS. The general is a reflection of the specifics, not a completely unrelated conclusion despite the specifics. But of course, the specifics are a deflection anyway. It's not about precision. It's just about whatever definition gets them out of the bad news today. Case in point, if this GDP report comes out on Thursday and shows unexpected economic growth, watch how fast that old definition suddenly becomes new again. Watch how fast those specifics and technicals no longer matter. Likewise, if those NBER technicals eventually declare recession too, suddenly those will also become flawed because none of it is actually about the truth. It is only about influencing how you perceive it, which is actually the ultimate foolishness in all of this. The idea that your perception of the missing dollars in your wallet and the fewer products on the shelves would be more influenced by them telling you what to call it than it is by the painful reality that your earning and buying power are lower today than they were before. But I suppose they may have a point. I'm sure a shocking percentage of society would gladly stick a thumb up their asses all day if Dr. Fauci told them to. A shocking number of us do and believe exactly as we are commanded, even despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary right before our very eyes. But I don't think that's most of us. I think for most of us, a rose by any other name would smell just as sweet, and a Biden economy by any other name would smell just as horrendous, no matter what the technical, authoritative definition of a good fragrance actually is. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below and especially over on Minds. That is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chatting my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Goodbye.